So I was working for this guy called Anthony Albanese, and then Peter Garrett after that. I used to do it myself. You put them on pedestals, and the truth is they're just people.
I won't say we're lackeys or servants to a greater power.
So we visited a company called Neoen, which is one of the leading EV manufacturers. They fully automated, right? So basically no people really hold. They produced one electric vehicle every 30 seconds.
Whoa.
And each one was different.
Just been sitting down with the incomparable Wayne Smith. Now, this is a man who lives and breathes renewable energy. Wayne has worked with some incredible people. He mentions his time in the Australian Conservation Foundation working alongside Peter Garrett. He was an advisor to Anthony Albanese in the early days, and was also instrumental in introducing harm minimisation and harm reduction when it came to drug and alcohol policy. This podcast, we're effectively concentrating on renewable energy with a foray into these other subjects. Now, this was great. I thoroughly recommend you sit down, strap yourself in, and get ready to be entertained and informed. We might as well start at the beginning. Like, are you happy to talk about like where you grew up and what your views were as a kid and adolescence?
Yeah, sure.
So Wayne Smith from the beginning. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Hey, look, full declaration at the very beginning and sort of breaking news, if you like. So, important starting point. I'm 57 years old. So I was born in 1968. A Gen X, a middle child, and so everything flows from that, right? Okay. Everything flows from that. So, I grew up in Perth, actually. Was born in Wooloona, in the middle of nowhere in Western Australia, but grew up in Perth. Spent first 21 years of my life in Perth. That's really the starting point for everything. So, let's go from there.
Wow, that you've just jumped 20 years in one. In one, is it fell swoop or foul swoop? It's fell swoop.
I think it's probably both, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of a foul swoop in there.
Well, I mean, as a child, were you an inquisitive kid? Like, are we the kind of person to, take things apart, put them back together again, or try to put them back together? And I always ask this question.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. So I was a middle child, so the Peter Brady of the family.
Right.
And
for those who don't know that, come on, you've got to explain that reference.
Oh, sorry, there's a Brady Bunch reference in there.
Yes.
Thrown in very early. So middle child, and so inquisitive. Yeah, I think so. I was, pretty good at school, but I was never really academic. Maybe creative a little bit. Maybe a bit introverted. But always interested, engaged, read a lot of comic books, so a lot of inspiration from that, watched a lot of TV, a lot of Saturday morning cartoons. That's sort of the things that motivated me early on and probably still do, to be honest.
Are you a voracious reader still?
No, I used to be. I used to be a really voracious reader, and I did an arts degree, so very much involved in that. And it's interesting, as soon as I got into the workforce and more into the workforce, the less and less that I read is the truth.
Wow.
And so just stop reading books. And, you get to the point where you read so much that it just reading becomes a bit of a chore, to be honest. And so I found it really hard to get into books. And life was all about dot points, to be honest, which is a bit sad, really. And it's only just recently I've got back into books again, which has been fantastic, actually.
And it does, like, getting back into books now, is that helping you professionally right now? Or is it purely for pleasure? Purely for pleasure.
I'm sure we'll talk about it. I've taken a bit of a break from the workforce for a while, and one of the things I was really looking forward to in taking the break was actually just getting back into reading. And so reading a lot of crime novels and stuff like that. Work by Chris Hammer, who's a fantastic Australian author, as a shout out to him, and a whole bunch of others as well. It's been really good to get back into reading, and actually reading just for pleasure rather than reading for work.
Yeah, that's the thing. I suppose when you're reading it for your work, it is a chore, especially if you're reading a lot of technical stuff, a lot of documentation that requires, your utmost scrutiny as opposed to going on the journey with the author, whatever the subject matter is.
And, I've got an attention span that lasts about 30 seconds or so, or less than that. And so, the idea of reading a lot is just, it's too much. It's too much. But now it's actually really good. I'm actually really enjoying that.
Okay. Let's get to the nitty gritty. Nature versus nurture. What actually defines a person? What creates a person? I usually ask this of engineers, right? What makes a good engineer? And you mentioned middle child, and obviously there's a lot of connotations about that. Is a person, is it nature, is it nurture? What's the combination?
Yeah, in a work sense, it's really interesting. So, because my family, a very conservative family, so they come from WA, they probably all vote Liberals, National Party, farming background, and so forth. I'm not so inclined myself. There's never been a particular interest in the sort of things that I'm interested in, which is whether that's environmental protection or now increasingly renewable energy, climate change. Very different to the family, and so that's interesting. And my family also comes from a small business background as well, which was never my leaning, but I'm now increasingly more engaged in small businesses, particularly in the solar industry, and that's really interesting as well. So I think, great family background, nice upbringing and so forth, and very comfortable lifestyle. But it's certainly, I think, one of the things that's really influenced me has actually been education, and just learning how to learn, I think, has been really important, and engaging in that learning process and always learning and just learning from others.
Learning how to learn. Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Oh, I think that's the purpose of university. That's what I've always said. I've got an arts degree, right? So that's it. So I've got an arts degree. I got a master's in international relations, and there's academic qualifications that come with that. But I think the great thing about university, apart from drinking a lot and other things, the great thing about university is just learning how to learn, and just thinking about how do you get knowledge, and being open to new ideas, and always thinking about new things, and thinking broadly about things.
So is knowledge information, is wisdom?
Oh, I don't know about wisdom. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes.
I can't tell you much about wisdom, to be honest. Definitely a little about learning, but yeah.
So you don't consider that you've got wiser as you've got older? Because that necessarily doesn't follow. I know that from personal experience.
It's interesting. I certainly know. I've certainly forgotten a lot more than I know now, and so that's interesting. I don't know if I get wiser, but you certainly learn from experience. There's no doubt about that.
That's wisdom, though, isn't it?
Yeah, probably is. You learn from experience, right? For good and for bad. You learn from your failures. You learn from your successes. And hopefully you get better as you go along in the process. Am I smarter now than I was 20 years ago? Probably not, no.
That's a hard one, isn't it, like being smarter, and it's a really prescient point at this point in time when everyone's talking about AI, and we will talk about AI and its role in society, and also specifically renewable energy in this whole industry, because it's playing a massive role. And I'll take my Greenwood hat off a little bit for a second. I'm personally quite scared, not of the technology itself, but how it's being utilised, especially without any rules and regulations.
Yeah, no question about that. And also, I mean, a bit related to that, attention span, and I mentioned it before, but and social media is a great example of that. I'm very comfortable on Twitter, 120 characters, and that's pretty much my extent of my writing abilities sometimes. But it's also, definitely attention span gets shorter and shorter. That's for me, but possibly for others as well. I do worry with AI that, and I'm seeing it increasingly in the workforce, where people go straight to AI for an answer. Whether it's accurate or not, we don't know. But also, I am a bit worried that people are going to forget how to learn, or forget how to actually write. That definitely worries me. And I think in terms of creativity as well, increasingly going to AI for creative solutions when there are so many creative people in the world, so many creative people in Australia doing fantastic work outside of AI. I do worry that some of those creative jobs are going to disappear.
I think you've hit on a few different points there, and like in regards to writing, I personally believe there's been a downward spiral for a while, and what studies have shown is when people actually write things down, they actually remember better because there's a physical act creating a neural pathway that results in a more embedded memory for that particular subject.
No question. I always take notes, right?
Yeah,
and every meeting I go to, I always take notes.
Yep.
I actually never look at the notes, it's the truth. But I always take notes, and it does actually help. It gets it into the brain, no question about that. And I do worry that, in my work, do a lot of emails, a lot of letters, articles, opinion pieces, etc., speeches. I think it's really important to personalise all of those things. And I do worry that AI is increasingly creeping into all of that, and I think it's possibly to the downside.
Look, you're dead right, and I can't sit here and say that I don't use AI. Off camera before, when I was talking about the podcast brief about your good self, I used AI to fill out a structure that I'd created, and it worked very well.
You trawled into my social media profile,
I did.
limited as it is, thankfully,
Yeah.
and came up with an AI summary of
Absolutely.
it, basically to ask me some questions, which is a little bit scary for me.
It is, and it's scary. It's scary for me too.
But good on you for doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had to have some talking point, and as I say to all the guests, it is purely a guide, and 9 times out of 10, actually 100 times out of 100, all the guests have been interesting enough to carry on a coherent conversation about what actually makes sense.
Well, hopefully that's useful for you as well with me. So we'll see how we go.
No, look, it all plays a role. But you mentioned about the arts, and it's arts and AI. And I know we're drifting a little bit away from renewable energy and advocacy, but we'll come back to all those things. But it seems to me that when people are interested in art, in books and stuff, it's not just the output. They are interested in the experience of the person who put pen to paper, who is up there on the stage. Is it Tom Stoppard? He died recently.
Tom Stoppard,
he just died, and.
That's right.
A wordsmith,
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Absolutely, yeah. Some amazing stuff. So imagine if AI is putting this together, they might be able to get that sequence of words correct, but there's nothing behind it. There's
that's right.
tangible experience.
No, that's exactly right. Although for the young people listening in, it's really important to understand AI and to have the skills in AI, because there's no job in Australia, I don't think, that you'll be able to take soon without that experience and expertise in AI. So AI is really important to the workforce.
Totally. But at the end of the day, I will say, I'll see if you agree with me on this one, it's a hammer. It's another tool that needs to be used correctly when required.
And I definitely support a strong regulatory framework for AI, and also that writers in particular and creatives need to be rewarded for their work, and not what's happening at the moment where billionaires are trawling into literature and just stealing people's material, intellectual property, without any financial benefit to those that actually created that work.
It's a massive area of concern, because it just doesn't stand by itself. It's the connotations of where these things will lead. Incremental change is what has brought us to, maybe that's for another podcast, but we will talk about civil liberties and stuff like that, and satire and the erosion of. So you've done your arts degree in WA.
Yes.
What was your first job after uni?
I did a bit of work at the university itself, actually. I was involved a little bit in the student union, surprisingly behind the scenes. So I helped set up an education department. This is at University of Western Australia, and then an environment department as well, which was fantastic. And then from there, my first, I moved to Canberra and did a Masters of International Relations at ANU. And then my first kind of real job was working, after I finished my Masters, working for the Attorney General's Department, Commonwealth Attorney General's Department, on, of all things, law enforcement policy.
Wow.
Yeah, working on guns and drugs.
You must have got some decent marks at uni.
I did okay. I actually managed to I actually kind of generally did better every single year. So as in I approved every single year. And yeah, did okay. Yeah.
So you're working for the Attorney General's office, guns and drugs, in that particular order?
Yeah,
or drugs,
Attorney General's Department.
Sorry.
So, and this takes you to 1996. And so 1996, I was working on guns policy and with the Port Arthur massacre.
I was going to say the Martin Bryant, yes.
So just before, actually, not long before, as it happened, the Port Arthur massacre in 1996. Remember, the Howard government was in then, beginning of the Howard government, and I was working on firearms policy for the Commonwealth Attorney General's Department. And then the Port Arthur massacre happened. 35 people died. I think it was 23 people got injured. Horrific, absolutely horrific. And that led to a national firearms agreement, a guns buyback scheme, which was both controversial and profoundly significant. And so, like, if there's one thing, you might ask me later, if there's one thing that I'm really proud of in terms of my career, if you can call it that, was working on the National Firearms Agreement. And actually, my small claim to fame was to do the first draft of the National Firearms Agreement, which led to the gun buyback. And so that was really profound and saved a lot of lives since then. I remember, John Howard famously did appeared at a rally of gun owners and was wearing bulletproof vest. And certainly where I was working, we were getting death threats and things like that. And the National Party leader, Tim Fischer at the time, was extraordinarily courageous in standing up for supporting strong gun laws when there was clear opposition from his constituents.
I was going to say his constituents who would have been the farming lobby and rural lobby, they would have been, can I use the term, up in arms?
Yeah, no, and they would have got death threats and all those sorts of things, and that's genuine leadership standing up for that, and we see the results of that now.
We're funny, aren't we, in Australia, from the perspective that we base our system on the British Westminster system. We have elements of the American system, but we have this island mentality as well. It really does sort of temper who we are as a nation and as people. And of course, we're incredibly multicultural. So the Attorney General's...
Yep, so guns policy and drugs policy as well. So we did a lot of work around harm minimisation and public health issues, which is interesting from a law enforcement perspective, but really trying to look at ways to, some of the original work around supervised injecting rooms, for example, prescription heroin, which didn't go anywhere as a policy idea, but also how do you just reduce the harm from alcohol and other drugs, including tobacco.
So it's almost a completely different approach from the guns. The guns was get rid of, whereas the drug side was, let's see this as a medical problem, a health issue.
Yeah, that's right.
As opposed to a legal issue, and so you're talking about harm minimisation. Because let's face it, prohibitions, when has it ever worked for?
No, exactly. And it was interesting, even at that time, there were some of the leading proponents of, not of legalisation, but of taking a health approach to drugs policy rather than a law enforcement approach, locking people up. Some of the leading proponents were actually people in law enforcement. So police officers and police chiefs and so forth, because they could see the amount of money that was being spent, taxpayers' money being spent on locking up people for no particularly good reason in the end, and that was much better to put that money into health. Now, I'm not saying there's been massive improvements over 30 years in some of that space. Tobacco, certainly, really strong improvements. We still have an alcohol problem in Australia. I contribute every now and then to that problem, but
me too.
But we still have an alcohol problem, and there's still certainly an illicit drug problem in Australia. But some of the initial work around harm minimisation was really important.
So there have been a lot of countries that have gone the way of a de facto criminalisation, or even in some cases legalisation, and Portugal's one. And is that something that when you were doing these studies that you looked at the situations where what other countries had done? Or?
Yeah, we certainly looked at international experience, and this is going back a while now, right? International experience was possibly a little bit limited. But you could also, there's certainly those that had maybe liberalised law enforcement a little bit in terms of drugs, but also there were those that had really clamped down as well. And so, countries in the world where, there's a death penalty, for example, for either drug trafficking or even drug possession. And so you certainly had those two, let's call them extremes, I guess, that were there to look at. But also even within Australia, different states were taking different approaches, and living in Canberra and the ACT was taking a slightly more liberal approach, a small L liberal approach to those issues. And so I ended up working for the ACT government on drugs policy. And working in the ACT government's really interesting because it actually provides a bit of an opportunity to trial things. You've got a population that's smaller, it's more progressive, more willing to trial some different approaches, and that was interesting. There was certainly attempts, and that's extended over a long period of time, including in the energy space, right, of trialling different approaches and seeing what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Because at the moment Canberra is quite progressive when it comes to their drugs policy in regards to possession, etc.
Yeah.
So you've done some already. You're doing these amazing things, and you're not even 30 yet. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah, still a young'un.
You're definitely a young'un with a little bit of wisdom and a lot of information and a lot of knowledge. So after the Attorney General's department,
I assume that the listeners are older than this, so if I can call under 30 a young'un.
Well, that's one thing we don't have control of who actually listens to these podcasts. Hopefully a wide range of people.
Someone.
Yeah, well, there's definitely people who are listening, and hopefully we provide some interesting conversations here. Because I'm already enthralled with what's going on right now. So what happened after the Attorney General's department? Where next steps?
Next steps after that. Reflect back now. Okay, let me fast forward. So then so I was working with Attorney General's department. When did I quit? I quit there, actually not too long after the Port Arthur massacre. It's the truth.
Wow.
As in, so I worked on. Obviously, we implemented the National Firearms Agreement. Personally, I wasn't overly a great fan of the Howard government, notwithstanding its fantastic position in relation to the National Firearms Agreement. And so you have those moments in time when you think, okay, can I really be a public servant and, act in a neutral manner in relation to the Howard government? And the answer was no.
Wow. So
I jumped ship. I went to the ACT government, but then I went into the non-government sector. And I was working in the drug and alcohol field. There's an organisation, a peak body called the Alcohol and Other Drugs Council of Australia, ADCA. It doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but a non-government body that represented particularly those services, drug treatment services in particular, and became a lobbyist effectively for them, which was really interesting. And so I was working in the drug and alcohol space, a bit around the mental health policy as well, strong interest in public health. And then 2001 made a complete U-turn and joined the Australian Conservation Foundation.
Wow.
And became their lobbyist in Canberra. And so working on environment policy, and then a little bit around climate change policy as well as it was emerging. But yeah, environment policy, which was really interesting. So I worked from there to about 2001 to 2004. And then after that, I'm working for an NGO, you can imagine, not being paid too much. And so then after that, I took a pay cut and worked up at Parliament House. And so I was working for this guy called Anthony Albanese. And
stop! You got to stop. You can't just throw in the Prime Minister's name. We're going to come back to this. Please wait.
And then Peter Garrett after that. And I worked with Peter Garrett actually at the ACF as well. He was the president of the Australian Conservation Foundation. Then he jumped ship into politics, and then I followed him, working for him as well. And then, and so if I can pause there if you want. But then after that, I became
we've got to expand.
And then I became a consultant, renewable energy consultant, got involved in the renewables industry after that, about 2010 or so.
Thanks very much, Wayne, for coming in today. So you've got
Thank you.
Quick. Now, so what I've seen is a theme, right? So you've started off with the protection, as in protecting people, and then there's a health aspect, right? Yeah, and then you've transitioned naturally to the health of the planet from an Australian conservation perspective.
Yeah, there's definitely a strong public health element all the way through. And I see climate change as a major public health issue. It's obviously other things as well. It's an economic issue, it's an environmental issue, but it's absolutely a public health issue. And in terms of environmental protection, I think similarly, it's a really significant public health issue. And so taking a bit of a public health approach has been interesting. And it was interesting when I joined the Australian Conservation Foundation because it's a big national organisation. It's probably the leading national environmental organisation then and probably now still. And the people who worked there, fantastic people, but a lot of them were sort of involved in the environment movement, and they came from particular backgrounds and so forth. And so I came into that from a completely different background, actually. Not, I had a strong interest in the environment, but I wasn't working in that area. And taking a public health approach, but also sort of understanding government to that was interesting. And I think that was a useful thing for the environment movement at that time.
That's what did they need structure when you were?
I don't feel structure. It's just a different take on the world. And I think that's the same at any time, right? It's actually really good to have disruptors. So people just think about things differently, a different perspective, whether that's from a different age or a different gender or different, financial background, economic background or multicultural background or whatever. It's always good, I think, to take on those different perspectives. And so at that time, I just had a different approach to things, thought about things a little bit differently, and I think that was kind of a useful thing.
So I can see the logical progression from there to renewables. It's all part of a whole, and if you look at, I suppose, the interdependence of all things, or from an ecological perspective, the interdependence of all living things, the first thing I said probably encompasses more than that. I have a background in conservation, land management, amongst other things. I'm old. I've done a few things as well, so I totally understand. And right now, so you're at Australian Conservation Foundation. Was it an advocacy role, or?
Yeah, advocacy. I was effectively a lobbyist, so I was their person in Canberra, and these were tough times. So again, this is in the Howard years, the Howard government wasn't known for its strong environmental record, is the truth, so there were tough times, but you learn a lot. You didn't have, I wouldn't say that we had lots of wins over that time period, but you certainly learn a lot from it. You take your small wins, and you also you learn a lot from that.
So advocacy comes from the Latin advocare, call to aid, and it's about actually presenting a particular view of a person or the public and presenting that view to the powers that be or to a stakeholder, etc.
See, I've learned stuff today. I didn't know that.
Well, I didn't know it either until the start of the day, and I went, something, I want to look up the derivation of the word advocacy, because it's really either Greek or Latin, and, because English is such a bastard language and it's illogical, and I mean, why make it phonetic, but it is what it is, and that's the language we speak. So it must be hard being an advocate when you may differ politically to the government at the time. How do you get your head around that?
Yeah, and sometimes you've got to advocate some positions that you don't necessarily agree with as well.
Oh, that'd be really
completely,
hard.
Which is always a little bit hard, right? But that's the same with any work, I think. You find yourself working in a place where you're going, really? What am I doing? Not that it's ever happened to me, obviously. But
that's tongue in cheek, isn't it? It's very hard to tell.
But look, it's part of the skill. You got to know. Always got to know your audience, I think. And that includes, whether you're talking to one person or if you're talking to 1,000 people. You've got to know your audience. You've got to think about what's the best ways to communicate that message to try to have some impact. And sometimes that you're not going to change someone's mind, right? And sometimes the purpose of a meeting or discussion, whatever, is not necessarily to change their mind. Sometimes it's actually just to make a point and to deliver a message as well.
You must have honed your diplomacy skills to a razor's edge.
I certainly had lots of meetings, right? So I've plenty of experience. Plenty of experience with it.
Okay, well, there's so much. I'm looking at this list, going, what do I ask next? Because there's so much. So we've talked about we've basically chronologically we've gone through the process, and there's this theme of health and care. You must have a high degree of empathy. Are you would you say you're an empathetic person?
Yeah, I think I probably am. Yeah, I think so. And hopefully there's a bit of emotional intelligence in there.
Yeah,
hopefully.
I
think that's really important and sort of important to the sort of thing that I do. So, yeah, I think so. I think it's always important, and this is maybe an important part of advocacy, is to put yourself in the other person's shoes and to think about what motivates them, and how to persuade as well. Again, sometimes the job's not actually to persuade, it's just to deliver a message to them and even to tell them the consequences for not doing what you recommend they do.
Right.
But empathy is an important part of it as well.
Well, because we are, at the end of the day, entering into conversations with other human beings who are fallible, who make mistakes and all of that, and also who respond to the same emotional triggers as we do, because we got the same genetics. And it's like, if you don't realise that, it makes things hard from a conversation perspective.
And look, it is interesting in terms of the work that I do around advocacy, and some of the work that I do is, talking to politicians, right? And talking to senior politicians, for example. And sometimes, those politicians are, I used to do it myself, you put them on pedestals, or you think they're, important people, in inverted commas. And the truth is they're just people.
Yeah.
Right? And, for good or for bad, and for bad and for good, they're just people. And so with the same pressures of other people, might have in life, some of the same challenges, same motivations sometimes, but also sometimes fair to say politicians are special people.
I think we'll come back to that term, that definition of politicians being special people. We'll definitely come back. They must be under incredible amounts of pressure that the average person in the street has no idea, not only internally in their own country, but obviously from Australia's perspective, we are, I won't say we're lackeys or servants to a greater power. I won't say that, but so there must be a lot of
substantial pause.
That's it. There must be a lot of pressures on them that we will never experience ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's probably right, but although you also don't want them to get away with too much. No. And politicians take different forms, obviously, in terms of whether you're a backbencher, or if you're with a minor party and independent, or you're a senior minister and so forth. And so obviously work pressures are different in different ways. But, the standard politician, like a federal politician, even a federal minister, for example, is a member of the local community. And so they've got to represent their electorates, which means that they have a whole range of requests that they've got to balance, working with staff, dealing with that. And then they have their own jobs as ministers and dealing with their portfolios and understanding their issues, which can be extraordinarily complicated. Energy is a classic example of that.
Wow.
And then on top of that, you have the internal politics and managing all those relationships as well.
Yeah, it's definitely nuanced. Did you have anything to do with Now, I've been involved in Renewables since 2003.
Yeah.
My first job was Queen Vic Market. I was a monkey on the roof. I didn't know the
fantastic.
difference between DC
and a great
AC.
installation too.
It was
nation leading, by the way.
It was nation. It was the biggest solar array in the southern hemisphere at the time,
Yeah, that's
and it was when a petro company, being BP,
Yeah, that's
solar.
right. And a shout out to the great team at BP Solar.
They were amazing back then.
And so many of them carried on and being absolute champions and leaders in the renewables industry in Australia.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It was the early days, but when Howard came in, and look, I wear my politics on my sleeve. I'm definitely not a liberal supporter and never have been. But, he brought out the $8,000 rebate for solar.
He did.
Now, were you responsible for that, or were you part of that, or is that...
No, I think I was, I can't remember the timing around that one, but I was, if it was 2003, I was certainly working for the Australian Conservation Foundation. I think we're probably involved a bit in the advocacy for that at the time.
This was about 2008, 2009.
2008, 2009.
Yeah,
I was probably working up at the house. I was trying to remember now. I think there was certainly pressure on the Howard government to do more. Look, the Howard government, to its credit, and John Howard, to his credit, I don't say this too often, but John Howard, to his credit, 2001 established the renewable energy target, right? And that's it was at 2%. For a very long period of time, and I was certainly part of the push to increase it from 2%. Working with Anthony Albanese and Peter Garrett, we worked very hard, and then the 2007 federal election, which just to advance on chronology, 2007 election, I think we took the strongest climate change renewables policy to an election ever. Until probably maybe you could argue 2022, I think, when Albanese took a very strong climate change renewables policy. But 2007, the Albanese opposition, not the Albanese opposition, the Rudd opposition, but Albanese playing a key role with Peter Garrett, they committed to a 20% renewables by 2020, and really pleased to have been involved in that policy development. So it went from 2% to 20%.
That's a huge jump.
And then obviously from there, pushed very strongly to get to 50% renewables, and that was a landmark moment when Labor committed to that, 50% renewables, and then obviously 82% renewables by 2030. Again, really significant achievement, I think a significant commitment. And now we're looking at probably about 92% renewables by 2035.
It's it really is a no-brainer for anyone involved in renewables. I always say, there's a great big ball of fire in the sky. We should be utilising that as best we can, and all the other things are debatable, right? And but you can't debate with that. The issue for me is that I've seen that it's always the incentive is always financial at the end of the day.
Yeah. That
drives any kind of industry. And for instance, like battery storage right now.
Yes.
Incredible energy densities, batteries have come down in price, there's a rebate, and as a result, from a domestic perspective, everyone's gone bang, almost to the point where there's no batteries left, and the guy's doing it flat out. So I suppose that's just the reality of the world we live in. These things will always be tempered by this economic reality.
No question, right? And that's a major motivator. That's a major motivator in people getting solar and batteries, for example. And I'm perfectly comfortable with that. For me, one of the key moments in my own thinking was, as the climate crisis became a reality, or firstly, projected, and then became a reality, and thinking, imagine if you could have a climate change solution that actually helped people save money on their power bills and made their lives easier. It's like, imagine that. I know. And that's exactly what solar is,
Absolutely.
right? That's exactly what battery storage is. It's a climate change solution that helps people save money on their power bills and makes their lives better. And that's why we just got to do more of that. And it's also extraordinarily popular. So from a political perspective, it's magic. And you go back to your question about the Howard government introducing the solar feed-in tariffs and so forth, and with the state governments, and very quick realisation that the people love it, that it actually helps them save money on their power bills, and it's extraordinarily popular. And by the way, there's an environmental dividend in doing so, which allows you to tell a story as well.
tick, 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 and tick.
Absolutely.
The one thing that's always frustrated me, though, is that state by state, there was different. Like we had that 66-cent feed-in tariff.
Yeah.
I think it was for the older systems, unless if you hadn't changed the system, the older system's up to 2025 if you still own the house. And then you had something different in New South Wales, and we always seem to have this issue between the states. And I understand the states have control over their geographic location.
Correct, and that's a challenge.
Is that
right?
what it is?
So energy policy is extraordinarily complicated at the best of times, and the truth is that energy policy is the responsibility of state and territory governments. It's not the responsibility of the federal government.
Right.
The federal government will always try to find ways to get involved in that where it suits them and they can make a real difference. But in the end, it is state and territory governments that control that. And so that's how you end up with a situation where each individual state had their own solar feed-in tariffs, but obviously have their own energy tariffs. Full stop. Makes it extraordinarily hard, but also provides opportunities as well. And again, you found that state and territory governments actually took different different amounts of time to actually understand the political benefits of having high solar feed-in tariffs. They were extraordinarily popular. New South Wales obviously moved quickly in that space. Then it led to some economic challenges, obviously, as well. One story I will tell you is that I was intimately involved through the Smart Energy Council predecessor organisation, the Australian Solar Council, in the Barry O'Farrell, the Farrell government, Liberal national government in New South Wales, was the first to say we are going to retrospectively cut the solar feed-in tariff from that very generous 44 cents a kilowatt hour and cut it back. We campaigned very strongly against that. We said you cannot retrospectively cut a feed-in tariff. People have invested their own money in good faith under clear direction from the state government as to what their return on the investment was going to be. People had done their calculations, and all of a sudden you had a new state government coming in saying, no, we're actually going to rip money out of your wallet. So we ran a ferocious campaign against the New South Wales government at that time to stop that and to stop that from being a precedent for other governments. And thankfully, we were very successful in that campaign.
That's a real success story, isn't it? Boy, you must have gone hard.
We did very, very hard. And, we had a rally at Customs House. I remember thousands, maybe 5,000 people, I think, turned up. It was inside Customs House. And there were so many people there that we actually had to leave the venue. We had to actually go out of the venue.
Wow.
And we went into the square outside Customs House and just basically took over the whole square outside. It was brilliant. And we did protest rallies outside Parliament House, rallies inside, lobbying members, hitting the phones, lots of media, very strong campaign. But also it was one of those campaigns where the New South Wales government wanted to. This is at the very start of the O'Farrell government. So they'd just come in. It was their first big policy and their first big policy defeat, importantly. They wanted to change the legislation to rein in the feed-in tariffs. Now, they didn't have the numbers potentially in their upper house. And so it was a classic example where politics is all about numbers. If your numbers is more than their numbers, you win. And so we lobbied the upper house members very strongly and very successfully, actually. And that included meeting with and successfully lobbying the Shooters and Fishers Party, who you wouldn't have expected would have been friends of ours and interesting given my background. And they came on board because they understood that it was absolutely wrong to retrospectively cut a feed-in tariff or payments to people.
Are you, like, from a personal perspective, are you quite strategic? Is that the way your mind works? Because I'm listening to these, what you're doing, and I'm going, oh my God, the amount of the organisation to actually implement those. Yeah,
and it's always working with a team, right?
Yeah,
There's always other people, but hopefully always have a plan.
It's interesting you mentioned about the Shooters and Fishers Party. I remember Wilson's Promontory, and they declared part of a marine park, and there was a lot of people up in arms. But then the shooters and fishers quickly realised that, hang on a sec, after a while, they realised that we were actually going, recreational fishers fishing outside the marine park area were actually doing better because the marine park was creating this environment that allowed the fish to breed, and the numbers actually increased. And it's funny when you explain that to people, because they go, hang on a sec, you're taking a segment of X amount of area out of our area. It's not going to be, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And as I said before, it's always about, you find out what motivates people. What are their self-interests? What are the arguments that might work for them? And try to persuade.
So again, that requires a bit of strategy about analysing your I'll say opponent. I mean, it's not. We're not talking about
But in some ways, it's no difference to business. A lot of your listeners, I'm sure, will be thinking this through. Yeah, we know this stuff, right? It's in. I think being successful in business. I'm not pretending to be successful in business myself, but being part of being successful in business is understanding your market. It's understanding your product. It's understanding your opponents, your competition, and thinking through the strategies to beat your competition.
So, and we're not necessarily talking Machiavellian approach to business or art of war.
But sometimes.
Sometimes that's, I was waiting for that. No, that's very true. No, it is very true, because at the end of the day with a business, and it's the business owner's family, and they come first, and as they should. My family comes before yours, but that doesn't mean you have to be a complete and utter bastard and compromise your ideology or your morals or your ethics to be good at business. You can be sustainable,
right. Absolutely,
yeah.
Right.
And this is, I think this is what a lot of people need to learn. Now, Smart Energy Council. Chronologically, are we pretty close to? Yes. Now, please.
So basically, 2010 or so, I left Parliament House, and so I should say, so I was a senior advisor, climate change, environment advisor, and increasingly, renewable energy was part of that at that time, a growing climate change solution. And so when I left Parliament House, I got involved as I became a consultant, set up my own little small, a sole trader, but doing a bit of consulting to renewable energy businesses and industry bodies and others working in that space. And in terms of Smart Energy Council, I did a bit of consulting to an organisation that was then called the Australian Solar Energy Society. And John Grimes was the CEO there, part-time CEO, and they were one of my clients. And then I guess over time, that consultancy with them took on, as anyone who knows John Grimes would probably say, more and more work, more and more work, and then and getting paid reasonably well. And okay, actually, it was all right.
Please don't elucidate.
It was all right. And but in the end, he made me an offer that I couldn't refuse, and joined the Smart Energy Council.
Wow.
And so I spent a fair bit of time consulting to them, and then a fair bit of time became a permanent staff member. Maybe 7 or so years ago.
Wow. So as part of when you're in and you're not still in. Are you still with the Smart Energy Council?
No, I finished up with the Smart Energy Council end of June this year.
Okay,
so it's probably about 7 years full time, but John and I have been working together maybe about 12 years in the end.
See, that's why you can't trust AI when putting a brief together, because it made no mention that you were not still at the Smart Energy Council.
I try not to declare too much.
Very good. I think that's a good strategy for anyone listening.
Anyone who wants to find out stuff about me online, hopefully there's not too much. There is, alas, some stuff, but hopefully not too much.
Now, while you were with the Smart Energy Council, was there much work done in trying to revitalise the actual Australian solar panel manufacturing industry? Because we had one at one stage. Well, we sort of did. I mean, it depends on your definition of made in Australia, but we won't harken back to the Bob Hawke era when it was made and owned they were going to do, and then they said made in Australia.
That's right. Well, BP Solar you mentioned, right? BP is obviously a global company.
Yes.
But BP Solar was an Australian operation. And BP had ambitions at that time, hopefully, but they didn't last as long as you would like. But certainly BP Solar, and there were some others in that space, Australian companies in that space. But the short answer is yes. No, absolutely strong commitment to Australian manufacturing. Probably one of the things I guess I'm proudest of, working with a whole bunch of other people over my time with the Smart Energy Council, and that's particularly at the end, was the Future Made in Australia program. So $23 billion.
Wow.
Future Made in Australia program, including $2 billion for solar manufacturing through the Solar Sunshot program. There's some great companies, Tindo, SunDrive, 5B and others are working in this space, and still some Australian companies working in the battery manufacturing space as well. And so Smart Energy Council, we set up what we called a Australian Smart Energy Manufacturing and Innovation working group, chaired by Rod Scott of Salectronic.
Oh, yes.
Fantastic shout out to Rod Scott, who does brilliant work.
Fantastic product, the SP Pro.
Yes. And the working group played a really important role in the development of that Future Made in Australia program, telling stories about, basically the challenges that existed in manufacturing smart energy products of any form, inverters, batteries, solar panels, widgets, whatever, in Australia, and what they needed from government. And they got a good audience from the government as well. And so that's a really significant program. We haven't really seen the results of it just yet, but we're not far away from seeing some really significant results from it.
I think a lot of people use the excuse of, look, things are made so cheaply in China, the labour rates are cheap. But the reality is now that a lot of it's not a case of the labour rates, because the proportion of labour that goes actually into the manufacturing process within the renewable energy industry is a lot less than people think. It's actually amazing design and fantastic cutting edge manufacturing facilities.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And not to take away from Chinese manufacturing as well. Yeah. The solar industry and the battery industry wouldn't exist in Australia without Chinese manufacturing. Australians wouldn't be able to save money on their power bills without Chinese manufacturing. And I've been fortunate enough to visit lots and lots of factories in China, including EV factories. And so I've seen what is really advanced manufacturing, and very few people. A classic example, in June, was it June last year, we visited China. We took a delegation of smart energy companies.
Oh, that's where you met Eddie, our director.
Yeah, Eddie. And just to be really clear, what happens in China stays in China.
Is it like that?
And Eddie, I'm not telling any stories.
No, I've heard some stories. Don't you worry. We'll leave it.
Robbie was also, formerly Greenwood.
Mr. Coleman, yes.
Yeah, Robbie Coleman was also on that trip. Again, what happens in China stays in China. There's things that I learned that I wish I hadn't learned. But it was fantastic.
Yeah,
They were great experiences. Anyway, one of the things that we did on that delegation, and Robbie, by the way, was just fantastic with his filmic abilities in that trip, and social media abilities. But Eddie was a brilliant member of that delegation as well. So we visited a company called NeoN, which is one of the leading EV manufacturers in China. And we went to their factory. And they fully automated, right? So basically no people really at all. They produced, at that time, this is June last year, they produced one electric vehicle every 30 seconds.
Wow.
And each one was different looking, different designs. It's just extraordinary. We also visited the Tesla Gigafactory in Shanghai, not quite fully automated at that time. And so you actually found some humans around, and they only produced an electric vehicle every minute. So a bit slower than the fully automated one, but it was extraordinary. So advanced manufacturing, not necessarily having people there in the factory floor, but employing a lot of people still nonetheless. They're just in different jobs.
Wow. So we're still at the Smart Energy Council, and as you just revealed before, June 2025 is when you stopped working for them. And we talked about looking at the effort put into Australian manufacturing and stuff. And is that still a focus for you from like personally and professionally, like advocating for Australian manufacturing in the renewable energy sector?
Oh, look, I'm definitely interested. It's definitely personal interest. So I should say, I finished up end of June and then took a long break. I did a bit of consulting in September to pay for my overseas trip in October.
Oh, no.
And then I came back. I was overseas for a month, and then I came back in November, and so I did a bit of consulting to pay for my overseas trip in October, and just doing a little bit of consulting at the moment, but no plans after that. And so still no plans into next year. So I'm certainly working with some companies at the moment, that Australian companies that are looking at manufacturing opportunities in Australia, which is really good, but also working with other companies that are looking at it, and including some people that are looking at potential opportunities for manufacturing in the Hunter and other parts of Australia.
Oh, the Hunter Valley seems to come up quite a bit.
Yeah.
What can you feel it for the people who don't know? And I don't know what goes on in the Hunter. So, but was it coal at one stage?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're talking about, Newcastle, Cessnock, that sort of area, Maitland and so forth. And that's coal country, right?
Right.
The world's biggest coal export port is in Newcastle, and lots of coal mines around that area. And so the history, the legacy of the last 100 years is a history of coal, and a really key part of that local economy, and obviously, and including coal-fired power stations at Liddell and nearby. And so clearly need to move on from that. Liddell coal-fired power station has closed down, and I would hope and expect that coal exports will end from there sometime in hopefully the nearish future. But the local community obviously needs to be looked after. You need to find economic opportunities around that. And it's interesting, the Liddell coal-fired power station has closed, and going back to the earlier conversation about future made in Australia, one of the big announcements made by the Albanese government was the $2 billion, I think it was $2 billion for the solar sunshot program. And they announced that at the Liddell power station with an in-principle commitment from SunDrive to potentially set up solar manufacturing.
Wow.
At Liddell the Liddell power plant once that's been replaced. And so there are a whole bunch of people looking at opportunities to ensure that the next stage of economic growth in the Hunter Valley and obviously other parts of Australia is through renewable energy and clean technology and climate solutions, and there's huge opportunities there.
It's one thing to identify that a particular technology or approach is better than another, and we're all converts here in regards to renewable energy. It is a no-brainer, but there's the people involved. There's a community who are used to doing a certain thing, and I'll give you another example: the forestry community as well, transitioning away from logging of hardwoods and just going to a plantation-based approach. It's hard. It's nuanced, and there's a lot of factors, isn't there?
It is hard, and you've always got to take people with you on the journey, and communities in transition. You've got to look after those people who might be left behind in that transition. But it's also the case that change is ever constant, right? So wherever you work, and we're talking before about AI and the disruption that AI is going to have throughout the Australian economy, and not everyone who's disadvantaged by the uptake of AI is actually going to be rewarded or compensated financially by government. That's just actually not going to be possible because it's just too many people. There's going to be very significant changes in the workforce as a result. But, you know, we make decisions and governments make decisions about local communities that they feel do need to be looked after. And the coal community around the Hunter is a good example of that.
And on that note, like the whole transition strategy, the transition approach, what's your view personally and professionally when it comes to natural gas? And I asked this because I asked Darren from the Smart Energy Council and Alistair.
A shout out to both of them.
Yeah,
fantastic people doing fantastic work.
Absolutely fantastic people and charismatic, and we all had a lot of fun. They were two separate podcasts, fantastic stuff. Yeah, so I asked them the same question, and what's your personal and professional, or are they, is it the one view in regards to gas?
Yeah, it'd be interesting if it's the same view.
Yeah,
but
I'm not going to say their view.
Old colleagues, former colleagues of mine, not old colleagues. They're still, both of them are, very young, except for Darren. But gas, gas plays a small role in the Australian energy system. It's a completely overstated role. Like you would think, given the debate over gas and the amount of gas advertising by the gas industry and how vocal they are and how powerful that industry is, you'd think they're playing a much more prominent role in the Australian energy system. But essentially, 5% of our energy comes from gas, and they've got a role to play, a diminishing role to play. It needs to be phased out as quickly as we can in an orderly manner. We certainly don't need to see any new gas developments in Australia. There's no need for that. I think there's strong reasons to have gas reservation policies in Australia. It is crazy that we're talking about setting up import terminals to import Australian gas from Japan and other places.
It's a bit weird.
It's just absolutely bonkers, right? It's absolutely bonkers. And it's also bonkers that that the Japanese government actually makes a lot of money from Australian gas, and that the people who pay for the Japanese government making a lot of money from Australian gas make money by exporting Australian gas.
Wow.
That is, the Japanese export Australian gas.
Wow.
And they make a lot of money from it, and the people who pay for that are Australians.
Yeah, wow.
Everyday Australians are paying for it in their gas bills.
It's interesting, and we won't go down this road too far. Couple of steps. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, I think, in 1986, stopped publishing capital outflow. Make of that of what you will. Let's get back to gas. I was saying this to Alistair. I think one of the reasons a lot of people hang on to their gas cooktops is a genetic component. And I'll expand.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
The flame, it replicates fire. And it's in our DNA to sit around a fire. And combine that with the gas lobby saying, gas cooks better than an induction cooker and all that bullshit. That's the first time
exactly.
I saw it.
And look, the gas industry is incredibly good at advertising, incredibly good at marketing, incredibly good at politics as well. And, cooking with gas is the phrase, right?
Yes.
That's marketing genius,
it
right?
is.
I mean, I like to say, as an alternative, cooking with solar backed up by battery storage integrated into a virtual power plant. But apparently that doesn't come off the tongue quite as well as cooking with gas.
You said that with a straight face too. Very good. Very good.
So if I had one wish, I would like to people, everyday Australians going around, instead of saying cooking with gas, just saying cooking with solar backed up by battery storage integrated into a virtual power plant.
What you have to do is work out a nice, catchy acronym to shorten that.
Well, I can tell you the acronym, but even that's not that impressive.
Go, because I didn't work it. No, okay. Yeah, we'll stop there. It's.
But the gas industry is extraordinarily powerful, right?
It is.
So it is definitely incumbent upon those in the advocacy space, probably those in the renewable space, to find ways to talk about this stuff. I personally don't. I wish that when people were talking about gas, there was a few more fart jokes thrown in. I don't know why they don't. Gina Reinhardt has gas. Why aren't we hearing these sorts of things? I don't know. But anyway.
Okay, mining and flatulence. We've made a connection.
I don't have any influence. So
that's... I'm speechless. Allow me to be speechless for about 2 seconds. That's enough. Look, it's interesting.
So if I can just leave you with one thought,
please.
Gina Reinhardt has gas.
No, don't say that. You're stating the bleeding obvious there. Wait, no, that's good. I love it. Oh God, you're throwing me completely now. What was I going to say? Yes. Okay. Battery storage. There's a massive push, domestic batteries, there's rebates, etc. We're talking about virtual power plants. We're also talking about the fact that the distributors really don't have to spend too much money on their infrastructure because it's been propped up by these batteries. It's a sort of a win-win. Where do you see this all going? Where's it all going?
Look, I'm pleased to have played a small role in the establishment of the Cheaper Home Batteries program.
Oh, wow.
That was it's been phenomenally successful, exceeded all expectations. You know, we had over 150,000 batteries installed in just 5 months.
Wow.
Since the end of June, and that's was at 3 gigawatts of capacity there, and that's just extraordinary. And it's actually making a demonstrable reduction in Australia's emissions, which is really significant, and is making a material difference to grid stability already after 5 months.
Wow.
And so I know that the federal government is actually much more confident, still a very big challenge, but much more confident of achieving 82% renewables by 2030 because of the Cheaper Home Batteries program.
Wow.
I think they've seen the future. They can see where that's going. I'm hoping that we will see a cheaper business batteries program.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
To help more and more businesses, obviously small businesses, but then going into larger businesses. I think that's really important. And I think that those energy networks have got a really important role to play installing batteries on their grid. I know that that's something that Greenwood is very interested in and playing an important role there, as are other companies as well. And so if we can actually get the energy networks installing batteries on the networks, then that really does reduce the opportunity or the need for extra expenditure, in terms of building the grid, transmission and other things.
Because it really is, a lot of it is about smoothing the demand on the grid. And because traditionally we've had this grid that has been designed in such a way for maybe, I'll pull a figure out of my hat, 14 days or a year, it needed to cope with this particular demand. And most of the time, the big coal-powered gensets or gensets are sitting there idling away under bugger all load. Second time I swore at Yuka. Under bugger, third time, bugger all, fourth time load. So it's now with the batteries, you don't need that excess capacity, latent capacity.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, exactly right. And the truth is, like, when it comes to battery storage, as with solar, we need everything everywhere all at once, again and again and again. We need household batteries. We need batteries for small businesses. We need larger batteries. We need utility scale batteries. We need all of those things. We need electric vehicles as batteries on wheels.
Yes.
All of those things we need, right? And we need it as soon as possible.
Now that you've segued beautifully into electric vehicles, we are entering the stage where there is going to be additional loads on the infrastructure all around Australia. You're talking about charging EVs, and it's not necessarily always going to be charged directly from solar. Well, we know that. Like, it just depends, obviously, but there's going to be additional loads at all these AI-driven data centres or data centres designed to cope with AI loads. We're talking about a lot of energy here, aren't we?
A lot of energy, we are. But we also, I think we know what's coming. And to be honest, we kind of knew this before with solar, the uptake of solar and the uptake of batteries. It always amazes me how many people did not see the massive increase in solar uptake coming through. and people who worked in traditional, let's call it traditional energy, in the energy networks, in the regulators and others who are used to a very basic way of operating a few big, coal-fired power stations, and then suddenly there's now millions and millions of power stations on people's roofs, and the network's not built for it, and then you just sort of people who sort of saying, they don't say it out loud, but people saying, why didn't we see this coming? Why didn't anyone warn us? And it's like, of course, the solar industry was out there for long periods of time saying, okay, this is coming. This is the economics, right? This is the technology.
What was it, ostrich in the sand?
Yeah,
what is
absolutely.
It, or what
and
do you
people,
think?
vested interests as well, trying to stop that sort of thing from happening.
Right.
But we know that this is coming. We need to be ready for it. So we need that investment in the grid infrastructure. We need to make sure that we're maximising opportunities for consumer energy, so for rooftop solar and for battery storage, and really unlocking the benefits for householders, homeowners. But we also need to, people, like, what's going to motivate someone to get an electric vehicle? What's going to motivate someone to make money from the electric vehicle, to use their electric vehicle as a battery on wheels? Money. Like, if it's in their self-interest, they're going to do it. If they're going to save money on their power bills, they're going to do it, right?
Absolutely.
If they're going to find a way to slash their fuel bill, of course they're going to do it.
Absolutely.
And governments should absolutely be encouraging that to happen, and not least in a cost of living crisis. And we all need to make sure that the energy system is able to deal with that. Now, that's going to take an investment of money, an investment of time, but we also have no time to waste. When it comes to data centres, look, there's a real challenge there. It could very significantly increase. We're seeing this around the world. It could significantly increase the energy load. My view is that if that's powered by renewable energy, that's good, and it provides massive opportunities. I know of one story I heard of a data center company that was actually looking at, I don't know if this is still happening, by the way, but they were looking at Western Australia potentially having a data center installed or built in southwest WA, and they probably needed
Albany down that way.
Well, let's call it the southwest.
Yeah, okay.
WA on the southwest energy grid, and which has its own grid, right? Southwest integrated system. And they were looking at one of the quotes that I heard was something like about 5 gigawatts of capacity is what they needed, right? The southwest integrated grid was around about 5 gigawatts. So you effectively needed a doubling of the energy grid in the southwest to make that happen. Now, that's a massive challenge, but an extraordinary opportunity.
Yeah, right.
And if that's powered by renewable energy, then that is incredible. That provides, one, a whole bunch of economic opportunities, job opportunities, and fantastic for the solar industry, backed up by storage. But also, you need to make sure that, one, it is absolutely powered 100% by renewable energy. We're in a climate crisis, but also we need to make sure that the grid infrastructure is there to make that a possibility, and that requires some work and some leadership from governments.
That makes perfect sense to me. With your work with batteries and solar and other renewable energy technologies, what sort of effort, maybe that's the wrong word, what have you looked at in regards to security? So we're living in this time, we're talking about the Internet of Things, there's cybersecurity issues, you're talking about all these VPPs, potential risks from foreign actors, whatever, accessing, manipulating, and doing a bit of damage.
Yeah, no, cybersecurity is a really critical issue. Certainly with the Smart Energy Council, we set up a cybersecurity working group and did a lot of work around that. And it is really significant. So, and there's challenges in terms of household solar, battery storage. There's challenges in terms of larger scale renewables. There's challenges in terms of wind. As you said, there's certain countries and certainly certain people who may not have our best interests at heart, and it's something we need to be conscious of all the time. But I would always say it's not about any individual country.
No,
it's
that's
not
right.
about
Yep.
any individual product. You know, there's issues with electric vehicles. There's also issues with computers, right? Laptops and a whole bunch of other things as
Absolutely.
well. You know, I worry about someone like Elon Musk, to be brutally honest, having control, so much control, given some of his political leanings, really dangerous political leanings that are very public. And so it's not about, but it's not just about any one individual.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure that the systems are put in place. I know governments and regulators are taking that very seriously, but it's also really important that the governments and the regulators are working very closely with industry and talking to industry all the time and making sure that things aren't just imposed upon them, which we see time and time again.
Yeah.
It's actually taking industry on a journey and learning from industry's experience about the best way to make things happen, to integrate systems and make sure that as much as possible, good notice is given and that there's time for preparation and planning.
Just like the skills we were talking about before, you know, being empathetic, being diplomatic, understanding what the other person wants and needs, and obviously unspoken.
And governments aren't always good at that, right? Often and too often in the renewables industry, and everyone from the solar industry who's listening in, who knows about the solar coaster, will know that, you know, things are imposed upon them at very short notice. And that's often when you have the worst outcomes, whether that's retrospectively changing feed-in tariffs or mucking around with feed-in tariffs without any consultation and other things, always a challenge.
Is there any specific research you know into new chemical battery storage? Like it seems that the majority of the industry from a domestic battery or energy storage perspective is sticking with the old lithium iron phosphate as being the most stable, not necessarily the most energy dense, but who cares when it's not in a mobile phone. You don't need it to be that energy dense. Yeah. Is there any more work that you are aware of or being involved in?
There's lots of work happening in the research and development phase and also a little bit in the commercialisation phase. My own view, I don't pretend to be an expert on this at all, is that, you know, lithium ion probably wins for maybe it's the next decade.
Yep.
Because it wins on price, right? And I think it's a bit like the comparison between solar panels, solar PV, and solar thermal. Solar thermal is great technology and it's got huge advantages, but could never compete with solar PV on cost. And so it couldn't compete commercially, and we've seen the results as a consequence. I think it's the same in terms of lithium ion, but there's also, you know, lithium ion's not going to be the dominant technology or chemistry for all time. And there's others, the Chinese government's also, among others, investing very strongly in other technologies, other chemistries.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of it is determined by your geographic location. For instance, Iceland has one of the highest kilowatt hour usage per household. I think it's 150 kilowatt hours per person. But yeah, they have to keep their cars warm. But it's all geothermal. They're not going to go down the road of solar. Why would they? Scotland being up pretty close, not much solar, but it's damn windy in Scotland, so they're going to go their wind turbines. So you can't expect one country's approach to be mimicked by another one if they're in a completely different geographical area.
No, exactly right. And of course, Australia is a lucky country, even if Donald Horne said that. Ironically, right, we have all the great critical minerals that the world needs, and you know, we've got the world's best sunshine, the world's best wind, and et cetera, et cetera.
Our only issue is tyranny of distance, I suppose, with our transmission lines. So what do you know about the whole virtual power plant side of things?
Virtual power plants are interesting. They're challenging. I think the renewables industry has done a terrible job in talking about virtual power plants. First, no one understands what a virtual power plant is. And again, worst phrasing ever, like virtual power plant.
Yeah, I know.
What the hell does that mean?
Exactly.
And then when people do find out what a virtual power plant is, it means they see it as meaning what the power company, the big power company, is going to control my battery. As to quote you, bugger off. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And so we've failed, and completely failed from a communications perspective, and I don't think we've got the commercial models in place either. There's been some good companies that have done some great work in this space. A shout out to Plico, I think, who does really interesting work in that space.
Can you repeat
and,
that?
Plico, Plico, and they're expanding their operations. They're a Perth-based company expanding into the eastern states. And some of the big power companies are getting involved in virtual power plants as well. And then that raises some questions about, what are their motivations, and can they do it in a way that delivers benefits for consumers, or is it just for benefits for the big power companies? But we need to get this stuff right. You go back to the Cheaper Home Batteries program. I know there's a whole bunch of people who have said that the batteries should be connected to the grid through virtual power plants. Those should all be connected. But, the consumers have to be there first. They have to understand it. They have to have a good offering. And at the moment, we're not providing that offering. And so a lot more work has to be done by governments and by the industry to actually provide a good offering around virtual power plants.
It's a really interesting area because a lot, and if I talk, say, commercial batteries, the holy grail seems to be developing systems that can control all the inputs. Where those inputs are coming from. It's solar and wind, and maybe it's biogas as well, because I didn't talk about biogas, right? It's not as bad as natural gas.
And of course, natural gas is not natural gas, right?
Yes.
It's methane, just to be really clear.
Yeah.
Highly polluting methane. There's nothing natural about natural gas.
Isn't it great? Again, probably a case of great marketing coming up with the term.
So beautiful.
Natural gas.
Natural gas. It's like clean coal.
Yeah, it's like...
It's not clean. Clean coal is not clean.
Well,
natural gas is not natural.
What's that?
It's actually methane, highly polluting methane.
This is the thing, isn't it? Because if you don't delve deeply, and a lot of people won't, they'll go, oh, natural gas, it's fine. But the reality is it's not natural.
It's not natural.
Oh, boy.
It's definitely gas.
It's definitely gas. Now, we haven't talked about COP 31. Have you been involved with COP? Yeah,
I haven't. So I finished up, as I said, in my paid role in end of June. And so did a lot of work in preparation for COP 31. And certainly from a Smart Energy Council perspective, we're really keen. I work very closely with a whole range of other organisations and companies, member companies as well, to try as hard as we could to make sure that Australia was successful in its bid to host COP 31 in partnership with Pacific nations. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened. It's a really disappointing outcome. It's good, I think, that Chris Bowen has been appointed the chair of negotiations for COP 31, which means that he's going to play a really critical role in actually getting agreements to a stronger climate protections globally. So that's really good. And there's also going to be what they call a pre-COP, so a meeting before the actual official COP in the Pacific, which is really important as well. So that's good. And that's a good opportunity for the Pacific, but still it's disappointing. One of the things that we did a lot of work on, and I did a bit of work on initially, was working with Pacific nations, a vision for the Pacific to become the world's first 100% renewables region. That's a fantastic vision, but it's more than a vision. It's actually a necessity for the Pacific. The Pacific, some Pacific nations spend, I think it's like 30% of GDP
on diesel.
On diesel. Yes. It is extraordinary, right? And so these are not wealthy countries.
Yeah.
So imagine if you could actually take away that cost, 30% of your GDP being spent on diesel.
That's huge.
And instead you actually come up and you're using technologies, and this can be done actually relatively quickly, relatively cheaply, using technologies that, one, help save money on the power bills, don't impact on GDP as a cost to GDP, hopefully nothing significant. Hopefully there's some support as well from international donor community as well, but also creates jobs locally and empowers local communities. Like, it's a perfect solution. They just need a bit of help. And the Pacific will take the lead in that, and they need to, and they should. But I think hopefully working very closely with the Australian government. So I'm hoping that one of the key outcomes that will come from that pre-COP, whenever it's held and wherever it's held in the Pacific, sometime in the next 12 months, one of the key outcomes is an agreement from all nations for the Pacific to become the world's first 100% renewables region.
Because obviously climate change is affecting everyone.
Absolutely. And it's an existential crisis.
Well, this is the thing.
Nations.
It's absolutely. You're talking about places like Tuvalu. They've lost so much shoreline. It's absolutely radical. You're talking about a smaller land area that they've got because of encroaching tides because of climate change.
And just quickly, there's a commitment under the Paris Agreement, to make sure that global temperature doesn't increase by more than 2 degrees and hopefully by no more than 1.5 degrees.
Yes.
It's not sure. We may miss that 1.5 degree figure, but if it increases by more than 2 degrees, then one of the consequences is that there are specific Pacific nations that will no longer exist. So it is absolutely existential for them.
And this is the thing we're seeing here in Australia. It's like watching something overseas on the telly. We're not tangibly connected to this image of, say, something in Israel or Lebanon or whatever. And it's sort of the same with Pacific. How many people have been to Tuvalu or Fiji or wherever? And until we fully make that connection, it's like, yeah, all right.
That's right. And to be fair, it's also the same in Australia, right?
Yes.
So there are islands in the Torres Straits that will no longer exist if there's a 2 degree increase in warming. So there are parts of Australia that will no longer exist.
Yeah, it's sobering, and personally, my worry is that, and I without a doubt, we will get abused in 20 years' time. Going, why the heck didn't you do more? You knew about it. Why didn't you do anything? So,
which is also why the work of the Australian renewables industry is so important, right? So if you think about it. Australia's got a target of 43% reduction in emissions by 2030. We're basically on track for that. We may fall slightly short, but basically on track for that. And the reason we're on track for that is because of the Australian renewables industry, right? It's the renewable energy target. It's government renewable energy policies and the actions of the renewable energy industry embraced by Australians that's delivering those emissions reductions. And it's only that's providing us with a chance in the future.
Do you think, are we in a position or are we already doing this? Are we leading the world by example or?
Yeah, we're definitely leading the world by example in a lot of spaces, right? There's some challenges and some problems which I can come to. But, Australia, there are days, and listeners will know this, right? There are increasing numbers of days in Australia, full days where 100% of renewable energy is coming in South Australia. 100% of energy is coming from rooftop solar alone. Right, that's extraordinary.
It is.
Probably the leading the world in this space. Right, we're getting closer to, maybe we're 2-3 years away, maybe. From days in Australia where it's powered 100% by renewable energy. Now, clearly that creates challenges for the grid that we've talked about before, and we've got to get ready for all of those challenges. But that is extraordinary. And again, how has that happened? That's mums and dads and families across Australia that have invested their own money to make that a reality. That's incredible. That's one of the great disappointments for me about the fact that we're not hosting COP31 in Adelaide.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic opportunity to tell that story to the world. This is what the energy transition looks like, for good and for bad, right? But, renewable energy is solar, renewable energy is driving down power bills, and for a lot of people, saving a lot of money on power bills, and it's creating jobs, and it's cutting emissions, tackling climate change.
Do you think there's a lot of predictive algorithms now used on solar farms and AI plays a big role. Do you think this is something we're going to see more of and we're going to rely more on the predictive nature of, yes, this weather pattern's coming up, this is what, maybe the batteries should be charged, maybe they should be discharged, maybe you should be doing this whole total energy management strategy.
Yeah, and there's some fantastic companies, some fantastic Australian companies working in that space. Must be one of the challenges must be, what does climate change mean? in terms of those predictions, because we know the
Yes.
summers are getting hotter.
Yes.
We know that there's increasing storms and adverse weather conditions and so forth. And how much of that can we predict? I don't know. I'm not an expert in that space, but that must be a challenge. But yeah, I don't doubt that that's going to play a really important role in the future.
Because the issue for us is that we're investing all this into renewables, and if the weather changes in such a way that we're getting less energy hitting those panels, for instance, and I'll talk solar panels more than wind, that's going to play a role as well. So we have to really double down in regards to this whole climate change.
Yeah, definitely double down. Double down on climate, triple down on climate change solutions. And the UN, the COP, has agreed to a tripling of renewables by 2030. Now Australia's basically on track for that, which is fantastic. Tripling of renewables, doubling of energy efficiency. And but we've absolutely got to do that. We've got to triple down.
Have you got some final words for our listeners in regards to just anything about how you see things, what you hope to see before, in the next 20 years, the next 10 years, the next 15 years? Any sort of points that you'd like to make right now?
There's certainly reasons for hope. I mentioned, but also just definitely some negativity there as well. So, and I did mention before about Australia's track record, and which is an extraordinary achievements in relation to renewables, really leading the world. But Australia's also leading the world in coal and gas exports, and that's a real problem. And we need to move on from that addiction. And that's going to take time, but it's going to be challenging. But we absolutely need to move on, and to be honest, move on as quickly as possible. I think. Look, I don't know. I think in thinking about, it depends on what you're thinking about. But in terms of in relation to climate change in particular, I think we should all be, including governments, embracing climate change solutions that help people with their life, make their lives better, whether it's making their lives more comfortable or helping them save money on their power bills or fuel bills, but working with communities and taking communities on that journey. And that's how we're going to be successful, but it also needs leadership from governments as well. And whilst there are some massive challenges ahead, I think there's definitely some opportunities. And I think, as I mentioned before, the renewable energy industry is absolutely at the centre of it. I think the renewable energy industry is full of heroes, climate change heroes, and people should really give themselves take a moment, give themselves a pat on the back for all of that, and also a pat on the back for the journey that the industry's gone through and just what's being achieved. And again, come back to the Cheaper Home Batteries program. 150,000 home batteries at this moment in time. It'd be a lot more possibly by the time that this is aired, but 150,000 batteries, 3 gigawatts in a 5-month period, that is extraordinary. And that's changed a lot of people's lives for the better. So, well done.
Thanks so much. It was an absolute pleasure. I learnt so much myself, and I think anyone listening is going to not only go away going, what, that was amazing. They're probably going to do a little bit of research after this podcast, because there's a lot of things that we talked about. Thanks very much for coming in, Wayne. It was a pleasure. Cheers.
No, very much enjoyed that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. That was great. That was really good.